the co-chair.
Joe Restuccia.
Okay, and I am going to just read what we are required to read prior to our meeting start as per board policy. So, greetings and welcome to the Housing, Health and Human Services Committee meeting for June. Manhattan Community Board 4 has a hybrid policy that can be found on our website. Board members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability or an extraordinary circumstance. Excused members and members of the public will still be able to participate virtually. Members who are joining from Zoom must leave their cameras on. This meeting is being streamed live on our YouTube channel and a transcript is being recorded. We do happen to have two of our committee members who are participating virtually, and the rest of us are in the room, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. And Maria Ortiz has a family obligation tonight, so she's not joining us. And we'll see who else comes in. And Dolores, out of the total, we have any other actors away, I think, right? So tonight we have two items. One is a presentation by the Health Kitchen Neighbor Coalition, social servicemen that has been used in many discussions for the board to look at it, review it, and then if we decide to post it on the board's website, actually acting as a resource document for the community. And the second one is to continue our conversation with City of Yes, housing opportunity. I want to note for every committee members that we were, to make it very clear, we thought we had to respond before our July meeting, and it turns out we don't, because of this is a text amendment, and we got a confirmation in writing from city planning saying they would take comments after that, which gives us the great ability to talk about it tonight, further our framework discussions in our letter, and then come back again in July, first week of July, which will not be the first week, it'll be, the calendar will be rejiggered because of the holiday, to come up and to be able to look at the final document.
Right?
And
Final draft.
the final draft. And in between all of this, we're putting together certain things. So I want to have me speak first on this issue with HPC, and then we'll talk about our general approach to what we're doing.
I'm confused, what draft?
We have a framework that's in the Dropbox.
Right,
Right.
but you said a draft would be prepared for the.
If we're gonna continue to work on this.
It's gonna turn into a
We'll
letter
turn the letter, right,
from our committee that then will be voted on at the board meeting at the end of July.
at the July 25th board meeting, right? Because we're starting to get comments, like other members have started putting comments. The Transportation Planning Committee had a meeting, they put in comments, and we're trying to build this letter week by week as we get more information.
So we will vote in July to
Right.
write the letter.
No,
We will.
We'll vote on the letter in front of us, yeah.
it's,
That's my question.
So basically, we're gonna be forming the framework for that letter to be written, which will be available to the full board a week before.
Yes,
Or a few days before the July.
because our meeting will be the second week of July, I believe, because of the holiday. And that means,
So we vote in July at this meeting
That's
to
right.
write a letter,
so
Joe?
we'll have a,
or we'll have a letter.
yeah.
So we have the July meeting is tentatively for July 3rd. Housing.
Oh.
I had sent in the email for the meeting for June, I had said that it was tentatively for July 3rd because it lands on July 4th. So there needs to be a discussion whether or not you guys are meeting or we're moving the date to a different night.
Yeah, we're definitely meeting in July. I left a message with Jesse for not the first week, but the second week, because we felt that people would be leaving on July 3rd if July 4th fell on the state.
Okay.
So Nellie, let's try to figure out the second week when there's a good meeting date. But the
Okay.
point is, Gigi, we will have discussed this framework, where we will adapt into a letter and hopefully get as final as possible at the July committee meeting, which gives us the ability, we've digested it, we've added things in, we've taken things out, and it can go to the full board, go to the Dropbox at least like a week and a half before.
So more time. It's just a lot, so we'll see the letter.
Yes,
for the July meeting, even,
So-
a draft of it,
yeah, well, what's gonna happen is, but in general, as we keep getting information, remember, we're gonna get responses back from city planning. We're gonna incorporate and incorporate and incorporate,
Right,
like,
so we should vote
yes,
to have a letter in July.
yes. Okay, so let's go back to presentation first. Now, if you introduce yourself, talk about this and discuss.
Sure.
Well, everyone, you gotta sit at a table, otherwise you can't be seen with the applicant. Sorry, folks.
So, my name is Matt Sullivan, I'm the community planner at the Housing Development Company.
I apologize.
Can you start over, please? I didn't catch you.
So, my name is Matt Sullivan, I'm the community planner with Clinton Housing Development Company. I work closely with the Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition. The Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition, for those who don't know, was formed in 2020 in response to quality of life issues that were born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the pieces of work that.
What is it made up of? What is the constituency?
Consists of block associations ranging from West 23rd Street Block Association all the way up to West 57th Street. As well as local business owners and other local organizations such as Clinton Housing Development Company. An item that we've prepared for tonight is a map that Nellie could pull it up. I'll walk us through it. Nellie, if you could just scroll down and click on view larger map underneath that one, it'll pop out to another page. And if you could just zoom out just a little bit so we can get the full scope, that'd be perfect.
Is that good?
Okay. Yeah, that's good, and then I'll ask you to zoom in when we're ready to show location by location, sort of the pop-ups, but I'll get to that. So using ArcGIS Pro, which is a mapping application, it's the industry standard for creating maps. It's a commonly used software with online capabilities, and it has the ability when you load a map, when you upload a map to the online server, you can integrate it into websites. So myself and Maya Felsta Housen, who was the CHCC planning intern, worked to build an interactive map that displays shelters and social services, supportive housing locations, and shelters for migrants. And this work builds off of the work that has been done by the Untitled Community Board 4 over the past few years. And that work by MCB4 identified social service facilities, homeless shelters, and temporary shelters for asylum seekers. As shelters and social service facilities in MCB4 open and close, they can easily be added and removed from the map, and changes will reflect on the map that's displayed on the website. So Nellie, if you could zoom in, do like 3 clicks so we can get like a block level view. You could zoom in one more time. And could you click on any colored building so we can view one of the pop-ups? Okay, so that's the CHCC building. So clicking on the location, so locations are color coded. Sorry, Nellie, could you click the 2 arrows in the top left corner, which that will pop out above the zoom in symbol. That'll pop out the legend.
In the top
Top left.
left corner, there's a double arrow.
No,
Sorry, the top left of the whole page.
Hold on.
close that.
There you go.
There you go. Well, there you go. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay, so the facilities are broken down into homeless shelters and social service facilities, supportive housing facilities, temporary shelters for asylum seekers, and facilities that operate as a combination of temporary shelters for asylum seekers and homeless shelters. So navigating around the map and clicking on a location will reveal a pop-up that displays relevant information about the location. This includes the name of the facility or the address. Well, it includes the name of the facility, which can either be the address of the facility or if it's given a specific name. It will also include the address, the facility type, which we know for this is Board of Housing, the owner or sponsor of the location, if the site receives funding from the Department of Homeless Services, and if available, the bed count of the facility. So now if you could click on a few, maybe one of the red ones for a homeless shelter. Right, so this is a DHS family shelter. It's owned and sponsored by West Hab. That's the address, 440 West 41st. We've noted that it does have DHS funding and it has a bed count of 120. So just by sort of navigating around, we view this as a pretty user-friendly, interactive resource that can easily be updated. Shelters can, like I said, be easily added to it, taken off of it if the shelter or service facility opens or closes. These maps are currently hosted on HKNC's website, and in a hopeful attempt to get them more exposure to the community at large, we would like to host them on Manhattan Community Board 4's website as well for public use and information. This is the first in a series of maps that HKNC has developed. We have also worked on demolition protection maps, so that we'll be presenting that probably at next month's Flint House Kitchen, because I don't want to upstage the Port Authority with a presentation. And a unlicensed cannabis shop map, which will be presented at this month's Cannabis Task Force meeting, which displays the locations of unlicensed cannabis shops around the district and around the larger HKNC geographic area, as well as licensed retailers, licenses that are under review, and we will include a layer of padlock shops. But point being, we can easily integrate this into MCB4's website.
Couple questions. One question I have is, the data about the type of service that's being offered, is that already publicly known? Or is it being sourced from public information?
Yeah, so it's being sourced from previous Manhattan Community Board 4 maps, which were sourced from communications with.
Okay, but they're not directly coming from the agencies that may have provided the sponsorship for these facilities, if it's a shelter.
Yeah, they would have, because the DHS would have informed the community board X, Y, or Z is happening at this location.
But the sourcing is still from the community board, not directly from the agency for creating the map.
It is from the agency because the agency gave it to the community board. So it's indirect, but it's.
Indirect,
But it's information that the board received.
That's fine, I just wanted to clarify
So we
that.
rely upon this, yeah.
And the second question is you asked about DHS funding, but as we know, some of the temporary shelters for asylum seekers have a different agency that's providing the funding.
Okay.
Do you have any marker for that?
Yeah, we can easily add a marker to designate. We can change the marker from DHS funding to funding source and mark those that are DHS and mark those that are funded by another. If it's a different city agency funding the shelter, the sites for migrants or asylum seekers, we can mark it as that, but that can
I
easily.
think that makes sense to give more detail because we know that
Yeah.
asylum shelters from so many different agencies. So
I think that would be very helpful, mainly because in fact we recognize that the quality that we've seen in services provided is very
Different
different in
ways.
agencies.
Matthew, this is terrific. That includes hotels, right?
Yes,
So
if a temporary shelter has been turned into, or if a hotel has been turned into a temporary shelter, that has been captured. Yeah.
thank you. Well, also,
Rachel, and then Betty, we see you after Rachel.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you and your team for your tech savvy. This is really impressive and pretty user friendly. my question is, you mentioned that it's easy to update the information. Who will be responsible for updating it and how frequently?
We at CHCC, myself and I will be responsible for updating. And we can update at, I guess, any pace if we receive information from the community board or any community members who want to provide that or providing information that a new site is opened or a site is closed, we can easily go in and update it on the back end, and any updates will automatically
I
reflect.
think it should come from the committee. So I'm gonna, it's on the board's website, should be from the board.
Okay.
Because you shouldn't rely on somebody saying something. It should be an official communication that X, Y, or Z is open or closed or changed.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
I think that
And that-
makes much more sense if the
Yeah.
community board, because they're responsible for what we put on the website.
Yeah.
That Jesse would have to be responsible for the content on that.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
I would suggest a monthly update. I think that that's sufficient.
yeah.
Everybody?
Yes, well, most people know I love maps, so I love your map. And I really hope you get it on our website so everybody can see it. I was wondering a little bit, maybe this is too fluffy, but if a facility closes and is no longer used for whatever it is that might be a shelter or something, is there any way to capture that?
That a facility has closed, I mean, we can mark it as. We could mark it as a formerly. As a former site of that, of whatever
I
service
think
they
it
provide
gives it
there.
a false impression though. If you
Yeah.
grade it out, it makes it sound like it's there. It's,
Well, but Betty, I think what you're getting at is all very valuable information, because one of the things that we learned, not just the summer, one of the things we learned during the pandemic was. There was no order to the siting of facilities. What is ending up happening was the city just gave, here are some hotels.
And the hotels raise their hands.
And then, right, but there was this, that was all they were working off of. And if the list shows, well, there was a temporary shelter here, now there's no one there. This may provide information for the community to recognize. This may also be a site that may, again, raise its hand to say, we're happy to take in people. Is that what you're getting at, Betty, for that purpose?
It could be for a variety of purposes, you know, that it's some places closed now and the community should know that, you know, and then, you know, your point is well taken that maybe it would be reused again for one of these service facilities. So it could be useful one way or the other.
Maybe there is a way to indicate it to minimize confusion, like grayed out or.
Yeah, well, if we were to grade out, we would also be able to add a new category to the legend that could whatever, however the community board wants to phrase it, we could specify that this location is no longer in service.
And then what date?
Yeah,
Sorry?
How are we gonna know?
Well, because you look at the legend, but I don't know the technology, but is there a way that the map actually itself is that you would load the map with active sites? And then you would load the map with all sites within the, including inactive within the last year?
Like a filter.
yeah, we can
you
investigate.
can do layers, you can do layers in this
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah, we can investigate the ability to turn on. Yeah, to turn on and off layers within the map.
Yeah, you can do layers. Just one note for Katie goes, I think you should separate homeless shelters from social service facilities. They don't belong in the same category.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah, Katie?
I thought you.
Oh, well,
First of all, terrific. I love it. Like Betty, I love maps and this is a great thing. Now, I do have a couple questions. You said that it's you and someone in your office, Maya, I think you said, who are keeping up the data.
Yeah.
So where did the data outside of community before come from? I see a bunch of reds and purples. Where'd that come from? Who loaded that up? Who's verifying the accuracy of that data?
Well, the locations were provided from previously generated CB4 maps that
But
were.
that's outside CD4. I mean.
Yeah,
Avenue,
the map that, right, the map that I had
CB4 map things outside of our district.
It had
Oh,
captured-
oh,
it had
okay.
captured
Originally.
Originally, okay. I see.
And then the source for certain locations, I can speak to that, came either from the Garment Center Alliance as a constituent member of HKNC, the 29th Street Association, they're organizations that,
Contributed that.
as they dealt with, like, the Garment Center keeps inventory of all social service agencies and activities and things.
Okay.
Because they're in their business improvement district kind of thing.
I have a question in regards to the shelters themselves. How do you determine the number of people within that shelter? I mean, you can have a shelter there, but maybe 1 or 2 people.
We don't,
Yeah.
we know nothing about population ever, we know about bed count.
Yeah, so
What's all this?
because I've seen empty units with no one and.
And vice versa.
Right, yeah.
So I have a couple of questions, quite a few. But I think they sort of boil down to sort of questions about the purpose of making this information publicly available on our community board website and about the methodology.
It is today. This is an interactive version of that.
Available on HKNC's
Yeah.
website.
I understand it's available, but community board isn't responsible for that. And so I think what we're talking about today is whether or not we're gonna make it available on the community board site. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I guess I have a question about why we would make it available. What is why are you motivated to
Well,
do that?
I can speak for, HKNC believes that this data should be publicly available because the community deserves to know where these shelters are located and who is owning and operating facilities within their neighborhood. And if it's a public agency funding a facility, there should be some transparency associated with that. And to put it all in one place as the easiest way to convey that data.
I assume if there's a domestic violence shelter in our area, that we would not be putting that up there, even if it was CC funding, is that correct?
The answer is yes.
We would put it up there?
No, the answer is, no, sorry, I was being positive to your question, other way around.
We would put it up there.
Right.
Right, and what I have heard said by DHS at some of our meetings is that they don't actually publish anywhere, and that they feel strongly about it, not to have publicly available a list or a map of where their shelters are. And so I'm wondering, and I guess this is just a discussion for the board or something, for the full board, but as to whether or not, what is motivating us as a committee, if we choose to recommend doing something that we have been told by a city agency is important to them not to do.
I'm gonna speak to that. I've had that conversation multiple times, multiple meetings, you've been present for that. DHS has said to us that it's confidentiality about their clients, right? And under HIPAA. However, as we have researched ad nauseum, Katie, we are not disclosing any individual, anything personal about anybody.
Right.
We are disclosing the location of a publicly funded facility.
Right.
And I have never, in my entire career, until this last go, in the last couple of years, had DHS, HRA, or anyone say to us, we will not tell you where a publicly funded facility is. And our district, frequently they come to our district, DHS, HRA, and ask to cite locations. We have a very public and robust discussion
Right,
and approve those.
right.
So the
But it
idea.
would be.
The
it's
idea that an agency says to us, this is a confidentiality matter, I'm gonna rephrase that. It's a matter of that agency not wanting to be transparent, because they know they will have public discussion and difficulty in citing. And it has nothing to do with HIPAA
Yeah.
whatsoever.
So,
And you say, what is the purpose?
Yeah.
All public facilities in our district are, if they are schools, if they are social service facilities, if they're supportive housing, if they are anything that serves anybody, the public should know where things are.
So that's what's interesting to me, right, is that the map that we're talking about right now doesn't mention, and I think it mentions a couple churches, not all churches. It mentions, interestingly, you have on there the Grow Board Office. There are just these sort of things, some things that are included. We mentioned no senior service places, we mentioned no police stations, we mentioned no schools. So we're not actually mentioning all the social services. What we're choosing.
School is not a social service.
Well, a lot of social services
No,
provided in many of our
a
schools, but,
school is not a social service by itself.
well, you could argue that the Grow Board Office isn't a social service either, but, there are lots of, we can have a whole full debate. I think I just want us to be super clear as a committee. And I do think that this is something that we should have a discussion about, too, but, about whether or not, of course, I mean, and it's something that we've been begging and we want to encourage them to do more of is DHS coming to us, obviously, beforehand with notice and talking to us about the sites. But it's very different about us having a discussion that's publicly available about a specific site and then making available on our website, oh, here's an interactive map. You don't have to go back and look at past meetings. You don't have to do anything. If you want to know where the asylum seekers are right now in our district or any of our homeless shelters, just pop onto our map. That's very different. And I think I'm not suggesting for a moment that we're violating HIPAA or anything else. But what I am suggesting is we have heard from a fellow city agency that they do not believe in publicly posting the addresses of shelters. And I understand that, HKNC, which isn't governed by the city and whatever, they can do whatever they want to do. But I think as a city, as an organization, that we are supposed to be working with them. And as you said, the information quite literally is coming to our meetings because we've asked them to come talk to us about these shelters. They have told us that they don't want it. They didn't even want it on our agenda, the specific address of the shelters we were discussing. It's a very big decision and one that I'm not comfortable with, but I understand people may have different views about us now saying, hey, we're even gonna make an interactive map to make it as easy as possible. Of course, it is critical that we gather information and that we make it available to the public. But I think it's very different to say, to provide data on our website, there are this many shelter beds, there are this many shelters, there are this many DP, domestic violence places, there are this many churches that provide these services, there are this many social services, here's how we define social services. We can provide all of that data without providing specific addresses. And I literally don't understand how, like what public good comes from us providing on an interactive map specific addresses. Like if a neighbor is wondering, I wonder, is that a shelter that just opened on my street? We're providing a map for them to know. Like, I honestly don't understand what it is we're trying to provide to them. And I do worry that it could really be misused. And I do worry that it is signaling to DHS and other organizations. Be super careful about what information you share with CB4 because you don't know what they're going to decide to make easily and colorfully publicly available.
I would like to respond to that. I understand Katie's concerns, and I think there is some concern. However, the city charter says there should be fair share throughout the districts of New York City.
Yeah.
How else are we going to determine that without having the information? So
And I agree with the data.
So I
Absolutely.
understand your concerns, and I think it's legitimate
Yeah.
to worry about that, especially with domestic violence.
Yes.
Places.
At the county.
That's something we should consider, and I understand that, but at the same time, the city charter says it's supposed to be fair share, so why shouldn't we know what that is?
You
Secondly,
should know.
I'm
Okay,
just saying we shouldn't share specific addresses.
and secondly, unfortunately, block associate residents don't know the shelter, don't they have the right to know if there's gonna be a shelter opening next door to them?
Sure, they're supposed to be,
So
part-
how-
we're supposed to help with that, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, we don't need an interactive map that anybody,
yeah.
where maybe not for purposes, come to look at.
I
If people
understand.
wanna know, absolutely, we need to know how many beds we have, and it would be awesome if we knew not only how many beds we
Right, I
have,
understand that,
but
but
every other district has.
should
Absolutely.
we censor information? I mean, I understand what you're saying, and you've got a good point. At the same time, the public has the right to know.
Yeah,
So how do we balance that? Now, I understand what you're saying. How do we balance that?
and
I'm
I,
not gonna have for a moment here, someone jump in.
say it again,
I want to jump in. I so am not understanding your argument because frequently you are proposing constantly we be transparent in what we do.
Mhm.
We talk about it and we make it public, right?
Mhm.
Our obligation as a community board is to inform our community,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I'm a professional. You're on a board of an organization, right? I have never, in my professional work, had any agency come and say, we don't disclose an address of a shelter. That is a brand new piece of information, right? Every shelter, every facility is publicly funded. There are constituents, taxpayers, and voters who should know where the government is choosing to fund facilities in their own neighborhood, right? We are not saying in a map like this, go and protest at this. And in fact, we could do something further. We could put in those pop-up boxes, links to the community board's positions on these things. That might be very helpful, because it gives you a much more detailed information about what happened here. But the idea that we should not have with technology like this, the easiest access to any resident, any citizen of the city of New York to know what is in their neighborhood, that is key. Because I will say that over the last 5 years, we've had such an issue with social services and the poor management of social services. And we need to know what's happening, what's in proximity one to the other. We saw recently without any notice, the sighting of the temporary shelter being moved from the east side to the west side on West 44th Street, and moving it right next to the buildings that are being required for services that are underserved. That's the kind of thing that if we had a map like this, we
I'm
have,
not saying we shouldn't have it,
no, but
I'm just saying.
but we are representatives of people. We are not the holder of information that someone's got to dig and find. The more we can show things and show it easily is great. Our community board has an affordable housing plan. That affordable housing plan has page after page of information and areas. We're proposing rezoning here, building over there, moving this here, what about this? All those things are publicly disclosed because everyone should know what should happen,
Mhm.
you know, where it's gonna be.
So I just want to know if a few people, I know a few people also had their hand on online and we'll go
Okay,
around.
so online.
Travis, you had your hand up earlier, for a while.
Thank you, Doris. So circling back to even having the former shelters here ties into what JD just mentioned about disclosure about fair share. So being truly honest about how much this neighborhood is carrying versus the rest of the city is important information for our constituents to know. Secondarily, when we talk about transparency, I think that having the map be as transparent as possible is very helpful in that it creates some accountability for the city because we can see how haphazardly some of these shelters have been thrown next to each other, in which there's some very vulnerable populations being put in some very bad situations, right? And I think the transparency of the shelters and knowing exactly where they are helps in that regard. Now, I do have a lot of sensitivity to the domestic violence shelters, and maybe in those situations, we carve out an exception where we note there are additional shelters in the community that cater to domestic violence, but we don't necessarily identify which ones those are. If that can be help in some regards to this conversation. But even I would argue, even in those situations, there's one right next door to my apartment that we've all known has been here for over a decade. And so I don't know. I mean, even if that's not public information here, it's still information that people find out. So I don't know if that anonymity actually solves any problems.
Yeah, Betty?
Oh, can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me? Okay. This is like a really minor picky thing. For the map, and it says legend, it says community board 4 shelters, blah, blah, blah. I would recommend you put something like shelters and blah, blah in community district 4. And then, there's another, label that needs to be community district 4. Oh, here, community board 4 boundary should be community district 4 boundary. So that's my little picky thing.
Thank you, those are great catches.
Kevin,
Sure, just some thoughts, like I would think about potentially approaching this, like, what's the mission statement, what's kind of the overall goal of this committee? My take on your comments is well intentioned, that unfortunately today's environment, things become so highly politicized, and we saying here it is, and then that results in some unfortunate incident or someone going picketing or worse, right? Because today it's worse. But then again, going back to the mission statement, if it's appropriate on the CB4 website, like, for example, city women's reproductive facilities, you want to talk about something that's politicized, or city facilities for LGBTQ plus places, right? Those come under attack and what have you. So if the mission is to try to be protective, then a lot of stuff wouldn't end up on the source. But it's understandable, like, abuse of shelter, women's abuse of shelter.
That's
not
special
that.
cases.
But I understand what you're saying. My take on it is today, you know, certain folks see it, they're gonna go outside and pickets and et cetera, et cetera. But how does one balance that? Because if you don't put this up there, then do you not put up other things where people are gonna go and picket and have acrimony around? And then I like Betty's suggestion about former facilities, because if you do that, not just with this, but if you did that over the last number of years with healthcare facilities, it would jump out of you, what has been lost in the city of New York in healthcare, in CB4, and all the talk now about mental health and getting psych beds. Well, who do you think closed down all those psych beds over the years, right? So if you would show up on the map where what facilities were available for healthcare at certain points in time, that would be grayed out what was lost, the same way if facilities are shut down for this. So I thought Betty's suggestion was very good.
Well, you know, this committee has a broad mandate, housing, health, and human services. I think it might be interesting that we take those pieces, right, and ask HKNC and the constituent organizations, let's do a healthcare facility now. That's a very useful thing, right? Or like an LGBTQ facility now. Having these things that anyone can access them, and I think the title's not quite right here. This should be social services. I think that's the main thing. Yeah, it's like social services, right? I mean, and then describe just different types of social services, really.
Yeah.
Well,
I would agree with you up to the point where you would actually put up a map of LGBTQ. I don't think that is in the spirit of what Kevin was saying, where we don't wanna show that. Because the politics the way they are today, it might end up causing problems. We just wanna show it, I think, more as it's a shelter or a facility, but not, I think that's what you were saying, Kevin, not the details of what exactly it is, say LGBT or domestic violence.
So it's services.
Just social service.
No, but the LGBT organizations come to this committee and ask for support on certain things.
Wait, but when Raul says causing problems, I just wanted to clarify, I think what you mean is not that shelter would cause a problem, I think it might be the labeling of the shelter, given there's a lot of homophobia, there's a lot of attacks against the LGBTQ community, so I actually do hear both of your statements saying, like, you know, domestic DD victims, right, and LGBT, by certain categorizations might cause that concern. I do have a point of clarification though.
Yeah.
So maybe a question for Matt, actually. How many of these can you just Google up? If when I went online and just put shelters and Hell's Kitchen, I would like to think that the results that I got here are somewhat also consistent or reflected in the map that I'm seeing.
It's already
Right.
it's on his website.
So I'm trying to bridge the concern here that was raised by Katie, where if the concern is publicized information of shelters addresses, that they're already searchable, right?
Well, I think we're in a little bit of a do loop here. Because, we know on the community board about lots of things that are in the neighborhood because we've heard from DHS that they're opening up. A lot of members of our committee are on HKNC. HKNC has taken the data that we've received here and made this map. Now they're saying it's on their website, so they've already made it public, and now they're offering to give it to our community board to make it public on our website too, to make it more easily public. But we're in a do loop because that information came from us, which came from DHS, and I guarantee you that you're not gonna be able to Google right now, where does DHS have,
But it's all publicated.
But you will be able
It's
to find
public.
information from many of the actual providers, will see where their sites are
Sure.
on their websites.
Right.
And that
and
is,
so you have to do some more digging. And I guess my only
Yeah.
point is,
but it's,
I haven't heard any reason, we all agree, I think we have to make sure, and maybe I haven't been clear. I agree, and I think everybody else agrees, that having the data and knowing what's available and making sure that when we hear about a new one opening, that we get input on that, and we make sure that the community hears about it, and that they have the opportunity to give input on that, we all agree. I have not heard anybody say tonight why the public needs to have an easily interactive map with specific addresses of these shelters. Of course, when we're giving input, we need to know, and the community needs to know, and we could even have a general map that says, whatever, on 39th Street between 8th and 9th, there are this many services provided, or this many beds available. On this block, there are this many, on this block, there's a school, a this and a that. We can have the information, but there isn't actually, I haven't heard anybody say,
Well,
why.
We are not gatekeepers.
I do have. a suggestion.
But we also are not supposed to be like spokespeople.
but here's a question,
No.
if it helps.
Dolores, I was first.
Go ahead, JD.
Again, I think your concerns are legitimate. But couldn't this be a positive thing for the community board to know where places are, to coordinate services, to help the immigrants that are here? Couldn't it be a positive thing?
I
It could be,
agree for.
but if it is, we have no choice but to make it public.
Or could the more elementary response to Katie's question be that if I was a refugee seeking a shelter, if I was a homeless individual seeking shelter, I could maybe Google shelters in Hell's Kitchen and maybe the CB4 website will come
Yeah,
up,
so-
or.
Yeah, but they wouldn't be, there's no intake in that.
Yeah, you don't get to
But
choose
here's
that,
a
right?
question for you, Kate, wondering if this allays the crux of the fears. It's about putting a specific address to a specific type of shelter. So my question is if we continue to have a map, which is overlaid on a Google type map, which has addresses, but doesn't indicate if it's family, if it's temporary, and no, the reason why I'm asking that is again, one of the things that you could say is who runs it, right? That information, then if they know who runs it, they'll be able to find out what type of shelter it is. But by taking away the specific type, we eliminate the problem of if we've accidentally indicated it was a domestic violence.
I really
site.
gotta say honestly, Katie, you have brought an issue to the table.
Mhm.
Except for domestic violence,
Mhm.
that there is no issue that exists. Because we have had multiple discussions in public, and all we're doing as a community board is aggregating that information.
Right, and
And
making
our-
it accessible.
And our goal should always be to make information brought to us easily accessible to the general public. No one should have to work hard to understand where is affordable housing, where's a social service facility. I hope that this mapping capacity can grow. So for example, we have done a full inventory of all affordable housing in our district, right? And it's in a spreadsheet kind of thing. If had it for years.
I would love it if we used that as our priority, or if we even had a social service, like if people need social services and they want to.
Okay, I just want to say you're a very good attorney to deflect. I'm not going to deflect here, all right? I'm going to stay the course and say that we build on something, but right now, the hot issue in our community for the past 4 years has been social service locations and having to interact with one another. And that has been through the lens of this committee and this board voting over and over, yes, no, maybe, in between, commenting on things. It is appropriate and proper to show this information, to have the general public have it. You are, and the one thing that you are dead certain on, dead correct about is that we only have one domestic violence shelter. And that one we should exclude because that's a privacy issue and a serious one, right?
Not just privacy, but.
Well, no, I'm saying,
Literally,
no,
security.
but it's
Yeah.
security confidential, I get that fully. But everything else, and especially Doris, I disagree. If it's a family shelter, people understand, oh, that's why I see the kids going back and forth to there. It's good to know that, it gives context.
Well, I was just trying to find out if the sensitivity wasn't the type of shelter. that-
No, actually, my issue is not about social service addresses. And I would actually say, let's have all our social services on a map. That's awesome. And in fact, I don't think this is accurately described. I think the terminology is wrong because you don't actually have all the social
There is a
services.
social
But anyway, we can
services
fix
map.
that. But my
With another
concern.
president now.
My concern is about the specific addresses of the shelters. And if we can say, fine, we'll take the shelters,
So,
right, if the socials, and again, I think there's so much confusion about the terminology here. If we took off the specific addresses of the shelters, and and also of the hotels that are acting as shelters right now, right? If those aren't on there, if it's just about social services,
Okay,
that was.
so let's go around here because we spent enough time on this. We have CDBS and that's a serious discussion. I want to go around the room and just get
I just want to make sure we have no one from the public,
Oh.
that has their hand up, so just give me a second.
yeah.
Oops, sorry. No, I do not see any hands
Okay.
raised.
So let's go around the room.
I have just one more
Yes.
issue. Where does this come in? I mean, how do we address the issue when you have a facility such as a shelter and also regular tenants? How do you classify that?
Again, I think,
I don't think we're talking about advertising or regular tenants.
I'm just saying that if there's no address, if there is an address, you know, what about the tenants that are just regular tenants who are not part of the shelter?
Yeah.
I would say that.
How do I, yeah.
Right. I think we need to raise a questions and issues on how to make a map like this more specific and more detailed and nuanced, right? So we'll raise it as a question, so then it's come back to us and we can talk about it further. But I want to get a sense just from the general, a map, an interactive map that has all different types of social service facilities on it. And we'll have addresses and the operator, right? And also we should note, in some cases, not like that owner operator is not correct. West Tab, someone else owns the building, West Tab operates it, right? So you have to be more specific on that.
And just a question, so, and then any vote we take here, is it going to full board or is it just something that we're deciding about what goes on the website?
I would think we're gonna bring this to the executive committee. So I don't believe it's really a full board action, it's an executive committee discussion about how to manage something. So let's just go around the room of having an interactive map like this with detailed information about homeless shelters and.
Start online?
Yeah, let's start online. Betty,
Yes,
Travis,
do it.
Yeah,
Earl.
Yes, I am open to the interactive idea, with as much specificity as possible, except carving out
Domestic violence.
domestic violence, perhaps even the issues that Kevin brought up about LGBTQ and reproductive rights and, you know,
Well, no.
if any of that is in there,
No, that's here.
then I'm okay.
JD,
I still am thinking about it, I'm still trying to understand completely what Katie is now making the distinction between facilities and
Services.
and the shelters or the immigrant asylum seekers.
Where people live versus where people are served. All the different social services in the community. I'm just saying that where people live, we shouldn't be giving out specific addresses
okay,
Where people live.
shelters.
at the shelters, yeah.
Shelters or supportive housing?
or homeless, formerly homeless,
Support housing.
Shelters or supportive housing?
but not where the asylum seekers are, or where,
No, if they're in a hotel, like if the hotel's been dedicated to asylum seekers or something, I wouldn't give out that specific address.
okay, and so the concern is that people might come to those hotels and
She's not saying,
Use it adversely. Would
Okay.
use the information.
why don't we come back to you, JD? Hector, your thoughts?
Well, I've got it so far, I mean, he looks. I would like him a little more interactive, like a few people
Right.
mentioned. And aside from the domestic violence, shelters, that should be set aside, for privacy issues. I don't see a problem with it, but I think we should just have more detail, actually.
Okay. Steve?
I would vote no on sharing the addresses of any of
Okay.
the individuals.
Steve?
I'm for it, but I'm concerned about the fact that you're labeling, let's say, building, and you're saying it's a shelter when you have people who live in the building that are not part of the shelter.
Right, that's your.
Yeah, the
Right,
transient
right,
type of shelter building that I live in.
I don't think yours is even noted on this map, but.
Right, but that, you can see, it comes on that map. then
Because the
it becomes-
services are provided by a particular.
Right, and all
And
certain
then there's funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun, yes. Rachel?
I'm gonna be a yes with conditions.
Yes. This is sort of like a poll anyway.
So, yeah, so I would like to see this further developed, and I appreciate that already there's been a lot of work that went behind it. Also appreciate having information out there available to the public. I would like the carve out of the classes of people that we are trying to protect, as indicated by our community law members, and also for shelters, like the addresses like that, unless it's already known, because, for example, I'm thinking about the shelters that are in my neighborhood, and I think people already kind of know where they
No, they
are.
know because we've been informed years before they were coming.
Or see it on the news, or I see them, right? So I'm trying to balance what's already publicly available information versus, the harm that might come from posting something that's not already published for whatever reason. So with those considerations a little bit more fleshed out, I would like to see a version of this map on our website.
Great. Kevin, you know,
Kevin
committee
doesn't
members, just sort of your thoughts. I don't know, voting, just kidding, we're trying to do a little polling thoughts.
If that's consistent with what this committee does, then I would say yes.
Yes,
Yes,
and Paul, I don't think you were here for most of the conversation for this item. You're on mute, just checking. You're still on mute.
Yes, I was.
Yes, I was not. I shall therefore abstain. I'm terribly sorry. Perfect storm.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we don't get a thought from you without the information. Thanks.
so we'll
Thank
do is
you.
we'll just make a little report to exec committee describing what our discussion was and discuss it further. Okay, great.
And I'm still not. For that.
I know you were, I know, that's why. And Jay, and I'm gonna note, and JD's still thinking.
Well, I want to, so basically, this was not a formal vote.
Yeah.
So we did not vote on anything. This is actually just an item to bring to
Yeah.
exec. I just, it's for the record.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, there was consensus that with certain changes, this is a good thing of the majority of the group, was consensus. Okay, so let's move on to city guests.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
I just bring everybody, and we'll put it on the screen in a second. In the Dropbox was the framework letter, right? Have people have seen that, looked through it, right? So I'd like to do a little bit of I want to talk about how we're gonna approach this tonight. Look at what has been put down on paper so far, which is a distillation of comments and issues raised at the various meetings we had about this. A companion piece that went out also were questions that were raised at the various committees. And what we did is there are questions in this letter, but they were extracted out. So there's gonna be a separate administrative letter for questions. So please use tonight as an opportunity of other questions you may have, so we can get this question letter fully fleshed out. Transportation planning has met about this letter and provided comments. They're not yet incorporated. Because there's a lot of the parking regulations that are being changed as part of this, that's going to be incorporated in. And so we're gonna review a bit tonight what this lays out. And then talk about our special zoning districts, right? Because for the first time we have, if we go, we're gonna put it on the screen in a second. This is the old one. Can you put the letter on the screen? Nellie, the updated version? I want to bring you to that and we'll come back to it in a second. You play the sidewalk.
Well, because we don't see
There are two sets of handouts. What is the larger?
It's gonna be on the screen. Here's
okay.
the larger one, but it's updated with maps in it.
Okay.
So Nellie, can you go to the section on special districts for the end? And then make it a little bit larger than 100, make it 125.
Say that again, please.
Make it 125, not 100. Make it larger on the bottom. Bottom right. Yep. Yep, okay. And now go down to the section about special zoning districts. I want to show that how this will look. It'll be in the Dropbox tomorrow again. Keep going all the way down. It's toward the end.
It's line 60.
Oh, where are the numbers?
Sorry.
Oh,
I think it's because it's an online version.
oh shit.
I just think the numbers, line numbers show up and then they go like right out.
Keep going down. Yeah, so, okay, there you go. So for example, right, after each section on the special zoning districts, you will see a map now. And the map will explain where these various things pertain. So let's, and Nellie put them in a Dropbox for tomorrow, okay?
Yes,
And can you also make sure the line numbers show on this when you do it?
yes, I will.
So let's go back to the letter itself. Have people been able to look at the citywide, well, first of all, look, the general idea here is that there are text changes that don't affect us and text changes that do. As we talked about, our board, go to page 3, Nellie. A little bit further up. Yeah, right there. That's it. And the proposed zoning text changes. So a little bit down, sorry. A little bit down. It's this section with those bullets. We want to get all
Sorry.
those bullets.
Here?
That's good. Okay.
Okay.
So there are many actions here that are not impacting our district. And we had a long discussion. I want to make sure just we confirm this in our discussion here today, that in many of these things, these are housing policy that has a lot of merit, but don't affect our districts. Anything in our district, and therefore we would not comment on them. The rationale for that is usually we do not comment on things that are not specifically in our district. Am I getting a sense on that? Does everyone understand
I
that?
think that's terribly important because this may be harmful to other districts, and I think we should not vote on something that may be harmful to another district.
I agree.
Anyone else, Pete?
Wait, I don't get it. So we're saying,
Well, if you're in Queens and
Yeah.
you're a low-rise neighborhood and you have to drive to work,
yeah,
and this is saying you're gonna double the height, triple the height of the buildings, which means more cars, which means completely destroying that neighborhood, and they're saying this is gonna hurt us. I don't think we should vote, yeah, you should be hurt.
no, I get it. I'm sorry. But so what's the proposal that we're only gonna be voting on the stuff that affects our?
We're only going to be commenting on items that are changes that are mapped in our district and text that is mapped in our district. So for example,
So
I'll give
we're
you,
not,
to give
we're
you,
we're not
We're not taking a position.
supporting other people's positions on their districts.
right,
That's right.
Or not supporting them. We're just saying, hey, we're only commenting on the stuff that affects us.
So we're carving that out here, the things that don't affect.
well, an example is flexible side yards, courtyards, and lot widths. That's about smaller homeowner neighborhoods,
Exactly.
2-story, 3-story. It doesn't affect us. Nothing's mapped like that here.
But however, I think it's important, Katie, that one line, many of these zoning proposals have merit on their own in housing policy.
We want to know
So
that.
we are taking a position that we do understand that a housing policy that is looking to provide additional affordable housing, these are some mechanisms that we are acknowledging are mechanisms that could be used. However, it's not our place to tell another neighborhood how, what the
If the
context
detail,
would be,
if the
right?
details of those work or don't work. Because we don't,
In that case, Dolores, to your point, I would add the word in line 90, may.
I was gonna say.
Zoning
may.
proposals may have.
Yeah,
merit.
that's great, that's great.
May have merit.
So I think that's the important distinction, it's like, it's not, we're not saying,
Don't,
you know, nothing makes sense or your housing policy is bad, it's that we do recognize that these are mechanisms to get to the ultimate goal of one affordable housing.
But I would also then, to your point, will add the word may in line 92 that say, so cannot take a position on such matters that may greatly affect.
Yes.
Very, yes,
yes, and this really lays it out that we don't know, because we don't live that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it may, but that's great. So now let's go to the citywide actions. So we broke this down on things that are citywide, because that's how the presentation was brought to us. The first item is the parking, right?
Now, if you can go down just a couple lines,
Oh, yes, the parking section, right?
thank you.
So here we noted, and please, folks online, please stop and ask questions as we go along, that the only thing we've been able to find out so far, first of all, we have a position not supporting greater parking. That's, you know, on decades and decades, right? But what we don't know is whether the way the special permits for parking work today, which are subject to ULURP review, are those being eliminated? Do we lose our oversight role? We don't know that. We asked that question. The second thing that they said in passing, we sort of putting their question out there. Does everyone understand what accessory parking is versus public parking?
No.
Okay. Hello? No, okay. So accessory parking is, public parking is anyone from the public, there's a sign, you go into a parking garage and park their car.
You pay.
And you pay. Accessory parking may be with additional fee or as a service in a residential building. And it is limited only to people who live in that building. So in zoning, the impact of a public parking lot, which draws cars from all over to park, versus one that is limited to X number of spaces for that residential building, has a much lesser degree of impact.
Some have both, right?
Hmm?
Some have both.
Yes,
Well, yeah.
your building has both.
But,
Your building has both.
but I think originally, in particularly your building, that was designed to be accessory. And
Yeah.
over time, private companies have come in and created, the public park, well, no,
Which
public
building?
parking, corner 58th and 9th.
Oh,
We're at 11,
Kelsey.
we're at 11.
Oh, no, that is, no, that actually,
So,
those parking, that predates any of these regulations. Because it was built at that point in time. But I mean, but the bottom line is some accessory parking lots operate illegally as public parking lots. But the question is, they said in passing that all accessory parking can now become public. So we're definitely having comments from the transportation committee, because if something was approved with an environmental impact 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that it was gonna be just this, now we're changing it, and that means now they become a magnet for anybody to park. That's a whole different story.
And other than that, there's no safeguards that are put in to how a building may actually have, the
Public parking is handled differently
Yeah,
with the
the
various
way-
mechanisms and things.
the way to protect their tenants, et cetera, what's the entrances like, et cetera, there was no comment on whether.
Like on our public parking lots, we have things like, we have gates, we have, signs, not required for the accessory.
Right.
So this is,
A
the
quick
idea
question, I'm
is,
sorry.
yeah.
What about lights parking lots? That doesn't fall under that purview, does it?
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't, because their nicer parking lots don't have permits for parking. They were developed as part of a large scale plan and the parking was included.
Well, they do have permits, because.
No, they don't have permits to authorize the parking use. You have a permit to park,
Right.
but there is no permit
Oh,
that was done through ULURP to say X number of spaces at this location.
Gotcha.
So again, we're trying to get information
I would just suggest changing the title here, because,
on parking.
93, line 93, citywide actions,
Mhm.
we're actually talking about actions that impact our MCB4,
No.
right? So it needs to be like,
No,
This is.
these are citywide actions.
right, but the ones that we're actually having an opinion about, not all of them,
No, all of these
right?
are not unique to our district. These are all that are being changed across the city.
Right, but aren't they, but we are having a view about this, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're asking questions.
Because it impacts.
Because it impacts us. I'm just saying in the title indicate that it impacts us, that's all.
Oh, like citywide actions. All right, got it. Okay, got it.
That
Sure.
impact.
I'll put that in the.
So now
bylaw.
we're starting
Yeah.
on line 93, we are discussing things that do have an impact
Exactly.
on CB4. Maybe we need to.
No, we need a heading above citywide actions. That's,
Yes.
that's, no, it's not, yeah, right, yeah.
Didn't I send that over comment?
Yeah, you may have, and all these things are not, all the comments are not included yet.
Right.
Because this is an older version, this version,
We will give Rachel credit for having Kevin.
Rachel, you were fantastic. You got all your things got done and you responded, so it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, thank you for filtering a little bit.
The next thing is shared housing. So here, again, this is a citywide change, right? We've always supported shared housing in our district. We're raising questions about them, right? And I think these were the questions, I know these were the questions that were raised in our meetings. Do we have any other questions or concerns to raise about the shared housing?
I do have a
Yes.
clarification. How do you give two separate reasons? Two separate people that live in the same
It's
apartment?
not the same apartment. They're legally separate. They're legally separate units.
Gotcha, okay.
The C of O says it's a class B unit, two class B units.
So it has to be divided.
No, not divided. It's,
Is that similar to the Aurora,
yes,
which has?
yes. So,
The kitchen and bathroom would be outside the room. It's like I think in a hotel almost where the.
so a class A unit is a kitchen and bath and any number of bedrooms and a living area, right? A class B unit are two unrelated people sharing a kitchen and a bath. And that's on the C of O, it actually would say X number of class A units, X number of class B units. So other questions about the shared stuff or?
Just or something like
Yes.
that, we should have some kind of brochure, showing us the setup for the various, configurations of bonds.
Well, that was actually in the presentation that they presented here, where they showed two rooms sharing a bath and a kitchen and like a living area.
Right.
So, we can easily drop something like that in our letter as a visual.
Have kind of a guideline, you know.
No, this helps. I mean, part of this is to try to be explicative of what it is, okay? So once they drop visual.
I think, what I really, I understand why you put them in the order that you did, but I really think that bullet point 2, how to ensure the existing apartment buildings with larger housing units are not converted, needs to be number 1.
Okay.
Because again,
Well, that's part of I want to get our discussion going.
yeah, so, and the reason why is my major concern is that these are nice ideas. However, the details have not been fleshed out and there are too many unintended consequences that I think that even if this does pass, that we run the risk, particularly in this area, throughout all of Midtown, that there will be landlords who will see an opening and literally eliminate what would be family housing. Getting rid of 3 bedrooms, getting rid of 2 bedrooms and creating smaller units where they can.
Yeah, I mean, the more we talk about this, the better. Next section is, yes,
Are we still in shared housing?
I was about to move on, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah, how does this impact SRO?
It is,
Or it doesn't, I don't even know.
Or it is an updated version of SROs, isn't it?
yeah, but it doesn't impact SRO buildings. Because SRO buildings, your shared. There is a model, right, that's been done in San Francisco, where there could be a bathroom and a kitchen on a floor that multiple people would share. I think we need to ask them if that applies here, because that's something we have not brought up.
But that's not part of what was in the presentation.
Doesn't matter. We don't have this text as phrased. They gave us a visual, but I know for a fact that's been a big issue in San Francisco, big issue meaning positive, that buildings have been renovated to do, you can have maybe 10 rooms on a floor. There are 2 bathrooms, there are 2 kitchens, and there is a gathering area. right? And it's almost like a dorm thing, but
Mhm.
the point of it is, that is a model of shared housing. So I think we should just raise this.
Well, I'm thinking of,
No.
I'm thinking of my building. I mean, there are SROs in that building, yet 20 floors have been demolished.
Right.
And, could the owner turn it all into what were formerly SRO units with their own bathroom and kitchen? Could they now turn it into
If
shared
If
housing?
it has its own bathroom and kitchen,
Well, there are none now, right? Because everything got demolished.
no,
Box.
but yes, there are legally, because we know the stuff was not done legally, right? So it doesn't matter if they're physically there, they're there. Okay.
I'm gonna say this from experience, because I live in an SRO myself, and the bathrooms and the showers are outside. You cannot convert these shared rooms into a larger apartment. And one of the reasons is because there's the waistline. If you have an apartment, every apartment has to have a waistline separate. You combine 2 or 3 different, SROs, you're gonna have, okay, that's fine, but you just can't.
The plumbing.
The plumbing is different for SROs than it is for.
Right, but let's for a moment remember
And
that this is now able to be done by not just not-for-profits, but by for-profits. And your plumbing problem will be solved with money, trust me. So what I want to say here is, in this, I think this is a key thing, Roll, that there's different, we got shown, Katie, that one model, but there are other models. And we don't know what the new text allows, so we have to ask that question. So let's ask that question as part of this.
So I just also, this is unrelated, but Katie, you said something very important, I just wanted to highlight, you said that wasn't what was presented to us, so I just wanted to highlight for all of us, I think it was a point brought up at the last committee meeting. What we saw was a pitch book.
Yeah.
The presentation we saw was how they wanted to present and how they want the city to see what we're doing. A lot of details were left out. And I think that that's really key because the rhetoric I'm hearing about the city of Yes is how great it is, how it's gonna solve this affordable housing. But the details of what they're showing is a outline of a possible way to it, but leaving a lot up to individual landlord owners actually figure out. Travis?
No, I'm agreeing with you, Doris. You heard me speaking to myself. The whole time this conversation has been happening, I just kept thinking about the predatory nature of this and how if I were a capitalistic landlord who wanted to take advantage of young people moving to the city who possibly couldn't afford housing, I can actually, instead of 2 young people becoming roommates and essentially find a 2-bedroom that's at a more reasonable price than me paying for a 1-bedroom. And I now can jack up the individual prices of these shared housing situations and kind of double dip as a landlord. And I think something like this happened in Boston years ago. And Boston had to like change their regulations to protect the students that were moving to that city. So I'm just really all the versions of younger me are like putting up red flags here as I read through this.
Again, good concepts, devil in details. Thank you, Roll. Let's go to small apartments. Pull that whole section up, Nelly, so you can see it together, small apartments. So here, we have, their goal is, the DCB's goal is to create small apartments, right? And, we raised questions, and these questions are listed here. How do we do the balance between studio and family size apartments? We asked, could 100% studio building be built? And their answer was yes, right? Well, that, be the best thing, because how do people, when their life changes and people come together, how do you make sure a building can change and grow? We have a specific, in the preservation area, special zoning district, 20% 2-bedroom requirement existing since 1973 to make sure there was always family housing built.
So you just said that, so there's always family housing, that you didn't write that. You're not giving a reason why we advocate for that. That is key, and that should be your number 1 point.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we have talked about in the affordable housing plan over and over again is that we don't have enough family housing. And that it is too easy to continue to build the studios, not even ones, the studios. And with the mandatory set aside for formerly homeless, that is the majority, we'll call it, of the affordable housing that we're getting are those smaller sizes and that are for specifically that AMI. And I think that we need to recognize that we are out of balance as a community if we only advocate for the smaller size, because we don't end up bringing families back to this district because they don't have a place.
I actually saw odd comments online, I could not believe it, in responding to some of this, where people said, well, why would families want to live in the city anyway? I almost fell off my chair when you had, like, maybe because they can't afford it, you know, maybe, and family, someone else said, well, you just have a small apartment and then you move on and you leave. Well, no, that's from a point of view of somebody extremely just starting out their career, their life, as opposed to realizing that people persist and there's a whole range of people who live here and have lived here always.
I'm concerned, and to use an example, okay. There was an individual, actually, the family, and was practically rejected, for being in the facility, taking care of their own mother, because the apartment was too small. And here I'm seeing that somewhere along the line, we're gonna have individuals who have family members who are gonna have to take care of them. And somewhere along the line, the landlord's gonna say, no, it's too small, you can't have another person taking care of you in this place. You'll have to leave or you will nurse them.
Right.
And I am very concerned because that actually happened. And I said, shit, but this is an apartment, this is a 1-bedroom apartment, it's big enough. There's a certain footage that's required for each person that's in that facility. Is it 80 feet or 90 feet? Is that what it is? Per room? In other words,
60.
It's 60 feet, square feet per person. So you're gonna get landlords are gonna say, no, it's not big enough, but it's not enough.
Well, it's also just the thing of people move in single, they end up with somebody. Even as a child, you should be able to arrange apartments.
So again, I think it's real important, and I don't know if anyone disagrees, so please say it. I really think it's important for us to move up that bullet point, that why we were looking for larger bedrooms overall.
Like underlying background explanation.
That would be.
But the other thing that I think is really important, because this came out of the discussion that we had at last month's committee, the rationale for this move was that we have too many young people who come to New York, say it's not affordable,
And are forced to
and
share an
so they're
apartment.
all sharing an apartment. They're taking away our 3 and our 2-bedroom apartments from families, and that this is to alleviate that issue. There is absolutely zero evidence that anyone can produce that's why young people coming to the city are choosing to live together, that it's 100% because of economics. Many young people may want to choose to live in a group setting. We just don't have any of those facts. So the fact that this entire section, this entire section.
I have data.
I mean, this entire section is to produce affordable housing, yes, but also to prevent the loss of family housing. It's very frustrating to have an entire citywide decision made based on something that has no evidence for their rationale. And so I'm very concerned about advocating for smaller housing, although I'm gonna put an asterisk on this. Studies have shown if we are looking to help those that are formerly homeless, smaller units are what they're looking for. That's what the research has shown. It's what a lot of people try to push for micro apartments, but advocates said, oh, that's wrong because they need more space, not recognizing the psychology of the space. So I feel very conflicted about this particular ask to create affordable housing in their plan, because again, specific to our district, we've been looking for more and more family housing. This whole rationale was around, we can keep our family housing because we're going to keep young people to stop living together in the 3 bedrooms. So I don't know how we at least highlight that we can comment that we recognize that they're using this as one mechanism. However, it would be advisable to provide some evidence on how they think they can reduce this problem, specifically by just building studios.
Well, we start to offer beginning solutions to this. In the next bullet we cite, this says eliminating the dwelling unit factor, which is how you get more small units, as opposed to reducing it. Maybe there's a middle ground to taking. The dwelling unit factor means you end up, if you have a dwelling unit factor, you will have larger apartments, right? So they just want to eliminate it. That's their proposal. Maybe you reduce it somewhat, so you get more balance.
What row are you on?
I'm on the proposal, let me at 135, the proposal eliminate the dwelling unit factor.
But you're at, okay, I see.
In other words, that's what this whole thing is derived from, the small apartments, right? The next thing is, we brought this up as a possible solution. Should this pertain to only conversions or new construction? Don't have the unintended consequence of converting buildings with larger units into making them into smaller units, right? That's an idea.
Paul, did you, never mind.
And then, the last thing is Dolores' issue. How do we do a balance? That's the big question. Try to achieve this to get smaller units, but not retain a balance to have these larger apartments. So I think this is the sort of like, this was the distillation of that conversation we had earlier. So I'm seeing heads nodding, so I think we're in the right direction.
But I'd like to ask the question of where they,
I'm afraid of asking for evidence, Dolores, because they can give us a pile of evidence that has nothing to do with anything, it just prolongs the conversation. It's like our NYCHA discussion. They keep giving us more evidence.
It would achieve our goals more, Dolores, to the point you raised, to just say very specifically, and I think we do, maybe we just need to strengthen it, like, we want more 2-bedroom apartments, like.
just say what we want instead of
Exactly.
putting holes
Yeah.
in their argument.
Yeah.
Good point. That, I mean,
Just
that's
literally
makes
just
sense.
make that, yeah.
Because
maybe
it doesn't
that's-
say that.
maybe that's-
124 through
Yeah.
it doesn't say anything like that.
Well,
Your argument is very good, but it's not there.
We
we add it.
actually, we added it, she said it earlier, to make a preamble for this. She
Okay.
just said it.
Yeah.
but yeah, I do think we have to be just really specific that there's a real need in our district for more
Family size.
You know what I really like about this?
2 bedrooms or larger.
Yeah.
I like this kind of discussion is that this all gets recorded and it helps us when we get to the next version of the letter to download this back and forth. The next thing is the residential campus info. And Hector, this is very specifically about NYCHA and Penn South. Those are the only campuses we have, right? And we definitely, we would support this. We want more specific information because everything that I've been able to look at so far in this area, it makes putting additional buildings in easier in terms of building separation, issues about lots. So all these things that are sometimes like, I'm gonna give an example. When the community board supported the 401 West 25th Street on Elliott Chelsea and the 1 on 18th Street in Fulton, there were all these issues. The building was too close to this, next to that. There was a garage, like we had to go through zoning overrides to get these things approved because they didn't meet a certain technical means and methods. Although, like you see them, the buildings were just fine where they were and didn't affect anybody, right?
I mean, we have proof that we've been able to
Yes.
achieve this and actually add more for it. I think what's important here is perhaps, even though it hasn't gone through, but to mention the agreements that have been, that we got to on Harbor View, or even just mention
We do,
the.
it's in the footnote.
That's the footnote.
Yeah, we did a whole footnote thing, we've done.
Cool. JD?
I think Bill, it's not just the residential campuses. Is it also churches?
No, this
small
is,
buildings?
But that in the
That's
presentation,
somewhere
they
else.
talked about
Oh.
the infill did apply to
I'm
the
sorry.
courtyards of churches.
Yeah,
right, but we don't have that. This is something I used to see in Queens or in Brooklyn, where you may have a part of a block that is a Catholic church, a school, a parking lot, and a convent.
right.
And the infill is, you take the parking lot and you put a residential building on it. We don't have that circumstance because our We don't have campuses of religious buildings in our district.
We don't?
Huh? We don't, no.
Or one-story buildings,
What?
one-story buildings.
You know, but they can go higher.
So,
Again, no, it's one-story buildings on a campus.
Excellent.
Yes.
I would be troubled if I lived in a residential campus and the city is now saying, I am going to take the play area of your children
Yeah.
to build a building. I would be bothered by that. I'd be very troubled by that.
The only,
not if your children were going to be able to live in that building.
well,
Well,
here's.
but that's not gonna be for another
So-
10, 15, 20 years.
So
right?
Raul, the only reason why, and I agree with you that on the surface, that sounds like, oh my gosh, you're gonna take away a place to play. But what we advocated for in the areas where we would put infill are where these playgrounds were not being used.
Or they get relocated.
Where
Can we
this-
say something to that effect in this letter, where?
Well, we need to do the following. We need to get a little bit deeper into what the zoning says here. And I think we're gonna make the note, see, it may even say something like that in that 976 pages, but I haven't got to that section yet. I mean, that's really what it is. It's just a pain in the ass. It's, you know, but raise the question, yes.
I agree with Raul as well, but, on a different segment, I agree with the parts for the children. But also, there are people that have had parking spots for quite a while, and they've lived in the community for quite a while. So I think they should, if they're gonna do that, they should try to do some accommodations, like maybe underground parking or something, rather than just displace all the people that.
I'm gonna say if these facilities are only if they're replaced or accommodated, and then I'll look in the text to see really what it speaks to, because
Right.
Oh, that
Yeah,
actually handles it for both, replaced or accommodated, so if there is some type of play area that there's an accommodation for, who knows? If
it's all similar
If
to,
the infill building has
it's
a
what,
gym or.
so the community board did it with the LHLC location, that was a parking lot, and we had the parking for the tenants, but nice tenants incorporated in the building. I mean, like, you know, and we can cite that also, as an example, that's a good example of a site, I think.
And the rec center idea is a really good idea as far as, I mean, you could build a park on a roof these days, so do something like that, or open spaces.
Well, in addition, what about the, garages, or the conversion of garages and lanes within our community? We do have.
It doesn't apply to us because the majority of garages are underground. We have, like, this,
Yeah, I know they have to be at least, eye level, so you can, it's exposed to the outside.
this more concerns, let's say, large campus development in Queens, where there's multi-story garage in between two buildings and the ground floor, that could be converted to residential. Or there's a large building in the 1960s, the ground floors were garages. That's really what it speaks to. You would be hard pressed to find in our district where there's a ground floor garage. It's just too valuable.
Across the street from where I live, we have, an alley where you can actually park the cars in between two buildings. Would that, how would you consider that?
It's private property.
It's,
Yeah, but couldn't that be converted by the owner himself?
it's not a garage. And
But
we're talking-
it's a parking lot.
the parking lots.
That can accommodate housing. I'm just saying,
Well, but
why
first of all,
decided to do that?
right, but it's not covered in this residential campus info section. There's a
Okay,
separate
right.
section about parking conversions. And we saw a slide that spoke about, and that's very much a different building type than we have anywhere in our district.
Mhm.
It doesn't exist. It's more out of boroughs. I want to move on to commercial conversions. We have looked at this, and I think these are the questions that we raised, you know, how do we ensure that a large range of apartment sizes, that theme we come back to again? If it's converted and that dwelling unit factor is eliminated, that could be 1,000-unit studio building. Talking about the income, I mean, outcome people looking for.
Excuse me, on line 166 about the household sizes, should we not be more specific, say, family?
Yeah,
Size?
I think
2 or 3 bedroom, be more specific.
I'm gonna make notes like this because we'll get the language down and then repeat it as we do each section, because that's one of our themes that's tonight. How would the affordability requirement be applied? You know, we believe it's 20%, but let's get details on it. And then we bring up the issue from our letter from MSMX,
Mhm.
which spoke to if this FAR increases, this could be demolition gets incentivized as opposed to conversion. And
Sorry, can I just stop you for a second?
Sure.
So we say right now, we say in this draft, that we support the 20% affordability requirement. And then we say, especially in, and then we give some specifics. Why do we do that?
because we just took a position on that last month.
Yeah, that was we voted on the garment, the Midtown South mixed use presentation from city plan.
And probably
Right, but
we should refer back to that letter.
the way it's phrased right now, it makes it sound like we support 20% affordability, but we really care about it for this thing. So, and I think what,
We should basically, for example, that's.
Yeah. So it's
Yes,
just.
yes, yeah, no, for
I don't
example, in
want
a
to
recent,
carve
yes.
it out, like, saying especially makes it sound
No,
like
no,
we
you're
don't
right.
care so much about the others.
You know, because I think I was trying to work here to say that we just took a position.
Yeah.
So we want, yes.
We were,
definitely.
yeah, you wanted to highlight that it
Yeah.
is something that is live.
For example, or
Right.
something.
For example, recent actions say blah, blah, blah.
But we don't mean to suggest
No,
that
we
we
don't.
care any less about it anywhere else.
No. Okay, let's go. So then I think we've hit this on the commercial conversions. Anything else? Commercial? No?
No.
Okay, now, new very high density districts. Now, I will say, our board has been very good on coming up with new acronyms that end up being part of city policy. I didn't know what to call this because it doesn't exist until now. FARs of, 15 and 18. So I labeled it very high density districts, right? And we give this whole idea of what it is and how many units could be in an apartment and how many units could be in a building. So I think lines 192, 195, we start to get to the idea, if you have a very high density district, you could get buildings of 600 to 1,000 units. So that's a huge concern on services and how we manage things,
I
right?
think we should emphasize that impact on services. That
Okay.
line is really important. You might want to list what it is. It also applies to the above section. If you create 1,000 units in one building.
Yep.
I mean, I stated this last month, I'm very concerned about taking a position that advocates for even more density. We talked about fair share. We know that this community board has produced and forced the production of more affordable housing than pretty much anywhere in the city by very carefully crafting within the zoning that we have. We still have that ability to do that. The current zoning laws, the current zoning structure does not prevent us from still producing affordable housing. This plan, particularly for this section here with the very high density district, literally just takes all guardrails off. Completely ruins context of community areas, but most importantly, as you just said, has absolutely no connection to any planning for any support of services in any shape or form.
City service.
City services for potentially that much density. And what it does is it creates a hardship for not only existing community, okay, forget that, but for incoming community. You think you're moving into an area that you have X, Y, and Z, and then when it gets completely filled up with the maximum amount of density, and you don't have the don't have the city services that can support that amount of density, it becomes a very difficult neighborhood.
But Dolores, I feel like you need to flip it so that you're,
If then,
you can't, let's ask for what we want, not complain about what they've already decided, right? Like, so for example.
I don't want any of this, that's.
Right, no, I know.
But that's part of the problem, is that we are, as a board, at the moment, taking a compromised position, because that's how this
so
board
we
is.
just enough, we already have,
I know that.
and it's consistent with our past.
Yeah, I know that, I'm just expressing,
Sure.
there's so many holes in this plan.
Right.
So the reason why the complaints are in there is because they even said to us in this meeting, oh, we haven't thought about that. We haven't thought that.
They said that.
We haven't thought.
I was like, you and I on the same page. I was like, what the hell?
Over and over again,
Yep,
so
super.
again, I think screaming out loud about where this plan is very flawed, because they're trying to paint this brush across the entire city, and not thinking about what is possible within the context of what exists already here, I think serves a purpose. That's why in land use, I made a motion to actually deny
Unless.
and not to support, because
Or
again.
deny unless.
But well, either way, it was the deny, it was the first word, and my point there is not because I'm not anti-housing in any way, shape, or form. It's that this plan is a very, very poorly crafted plan.
It's not crafted.
I was gonna say it's not crafty.
But, and I don't think that it's helpful to be supportive of bad policy in the name of just for the outcome that we wish we could have achieved. Because this community knows how to achieve it with restrictive zoning.
Right, but I guess my point is like, I think what we need to say is, we can't have the fight, we're not gonna win the fight.
We might win the fight,
We're not,
that's my point.
well,
Part of it, no, parts of the fight, part of it.
we're not gonna win the fight. Oh dear, I just made the document disappear. I don't know what I did, but anyway, it'll come back. I think what we should do here is like, you're saying, oh, you know, if it was that huge, it could have all sorts of unintended consequences. Let's say if a building is gonna be
15 or 18.
15 to 18, then, you know, all of the following need to be addressed, right? There need to be more schools, there needs to be more whatever, you know, street, blah, 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 whatever. But, so not to say it's ridiculous that you're thinking about making them extra tall. But if you do this extreme measure, then these are all the other things that have to be thought about to avoid any unintended consequences.
So maybe we tie
Right, so we're just flipping it, that's all.
Right, so let's tie this together. We've already said we want a special permit process if it goes that high. Why don't we here note a special permit process with a series of findings? Because that actually says, you've got to have the findings to say, the school seats are there. Yes, in other words, let's give them, they don't want to think like this, right? Let's give them a bit of a roadmap.
Yeah,
Good.
Like,
Joe, you said a special what type of process? It got garbled there for a second.
Permit is what the board's already taken a position for, and that is, in a special permit, in order to get something, you must say that you will do this because you're able to do X, Y, and Z. Like in the theater district, you can transfer development rights as long as one of the special permits findings, right? It's a Euler issue, is you're contributing to the purposes of the theater district. You are affordable space for it lays out things that you must meet. And if we say something like that, then we're, to Katie's point, in a positive way, saying, if you want to do this, you must indicate that you are meeting these findings, right? So like, I thought of something simple and stupid, I'm putting it here by saying, like, if you have a 1,000-unit building, city bike. People use bikes, you're gonna immediately run out of that's like basic, it's become a basic city service, things like that. So let's say special permit with findings.
Speaking of the language that Katie, if we're flipping the script in that way, perhaps the headings are actually different. Instead of. I gotta think about language, but thinking about you're saying to flip this, it needs to go ahead and, for my purpose, and I think everyone else's purpose, it needs to shine a light on where there are problems.
where there could be unintended consequences.
Where there are problems, but to our board's position always is to find the solutions.
Right.
Is maybe the bullet points are, we would need a special permit, but maybe the bullet points are, with this type of density, these are maybe we're just mapping out what exactly those concerns are.
No, but I think she's right about, I think it's more detailed. So let me ask the committee members, just to shoot to myself and Maria, some of the findings you think would be, okay?
That's great.
We can't figure it out tonight entirely, but that's
Special permit.
Yeah.
Just that, the findings you're listing.
right.
But see, now they're not gonna know how angry I am.
let's keep going, we got more to go. We're nowhere to, okay, now we got, yeah.
Is there any way for us to try to propose this as a requirement before they can proceed with the expansions of this building?
Well, so what's happening here is that this zoning is, if the city of Yes Housing Opportunity Zoning is adopted, it authorizes the new districts. It does not mean it maps them. So they will still have to go for a full ULURP process to map something. But we want to give them more of a roadmap on what happens as part of that mapping. That's a really good, solid, like, here's the solution, here's what you gotta do to help people figure this out, as opposed to giving you a carte blanche and it's done off the cuff every time, right? That's.
But my concern is that, okay, you give them the roadmap, and say, yeah, we're gonna do it, we're gonna take care of it, but then they build up.
No, they don't build up. They have, those zones are not even mapped anywhere in the city at all.
Right, but when they, if they.
No, not if when they are. They have to do a separate zoning action to do that, Hector.
I understand, but what I'm saying is, if it proceeds, okay, if it happens, and they're allowed to build on, it's on parking lots or God forbid parks as well, then why not make it a requirement that they supply either funds or set aside some monetary fund or build these schools?
So you're back to the info stuff. Now we gotta look at the text to find out what it says. We don't know.
Well, but Jeff just bringing up a good point, and the reason why it's a good point is we're still opening the door to the situation that we're in right now today, where we've carefully crafted, really sound planning for housing in the Western Rail Yards, and suddenly, time to change. The developer can't do this because it's too expensive. And so now there's a whole attempt to just change everything. And that is a concern, and I'm wondering how to add language to codify that if there is the attempt for all of this upzoning in these high density areas, that they go through that checklist and that it has to happen before they can even go ahead and build, and they can't go ahead and scrap it. I'm trying to figure out how we protect it, because clearly we've seen the MTA site, the DEP site, Western Rail Yards, all of these things, we've crafted the language in providing the amount of affordable housing that we wanted, even Slaughterhouse. And all of these have changed because of our electeds not supporting.
Okay, so let's try separate things here. We have fruit salad.
It is fruit salad.
And it's making the separate fruits for a second, right? So apples over here, campus infill, different story, gotta find out the text, right? This high density stuff, special permit, they're gonna give some ideas of findings. And then I think we wanna say is anything like this, if there's agreements under the findings, it has to be that the final CFO is contingent upon delivering those agreements, right? Because I think that's that's a standard thing you do in these kind of large developments, right? So if you're gonna build a building that's got a theater in it, you gotta get the CFO in the theater first, you get the CFO in the building, right? Good stuff. So we'll say, we don't have that final CFO issue. But what I want to do is I want to pull us ahead to the next thing, which is the universal affordability preference, right? And again, general, very good idea. It's the execution here. It's really good. So pretty much what I've been able to figure out since we had this discussion is every district pretty much just gets upzoned. And you upzone it, and that gets you the affordability requirement. So if today you're in what's called an R8 district, if you have a lot in our neighborhood, which has a roughly 6 FAR, that turns into an R9 district, which is 7.2. So we have to think about managing our expectations that what we see and how our neighborhood looks is a result of the zoning. And this is a across the board thing. So how do we deal with that? And then in certain locations, certainly this makes sense. Like that building we talked about a lot on the corner of 23rd and 8th. Corner building, wide street, wide avenue. It got bigger, it's not gonna have that impact. But this brings this into the mid blocks. So that's definitely a question and how we deal with it, especially when we get in Chelsea where there are no special zoning districts.
I don't know if you mentioned.
Yeah, so that's just a general idea of like what this means in general. Now I go down to the next section. So inclusionary housing. It is not clear how the interaction between the voluntary inclusionary program, universal affordability, and the mandatory inclusionary program work. I had a discussion 2 weeks ago with a developer of both affordable and market rate housing, who has been told the whole idea is to get rid of mandatory inclusionary housing. I don't know if we want that to happen, so we got to understand in the details how these things work together. But one of the items here, and we'll highlight it in a section of its own business, is the AMI issue, right? And this new zoning reduces the averaging to only lower AMIs. Our community board has been on record for many, many years to have a range of incomes. So we're satisfying folks who are from lower, moderate, and middle. And the AMI bands have gone up in the last couple of years. But the truth is, which when we talked to the city planning folks, they didn't even internalize. What does a 2-bedroom rent for in Chelsea? $7,800, something like that. So, well, nobody who's at those income bands, that's a family, can afford that market rent. And our problem here is if we are average everything lower, we are excluding the moderate and middle.
I mean, and even MIH, they excluded workforce.
Right.
AMIs for Manhattan. So again.
Wait, I'm sorry, do you want to say that again?
So there was, when mandatory inclusionary housing was put through, one of the potential mandatory AMIs was for folks that were maybe teachers,
Civil servants.
exactly, that range.
Two household earners, civil servants.
And they excluded that from Manhattan, so there was no mandatory, it was not mandatory to build housing for that.
That option was excluded from it.
Right, and so again, what we're seeing here is that there is no
Explicit reference to creating,
but even.
The opposite, they're actually eliminating it.
Yeah, but my biggest problem is what we're not doing is identifying what are the needs in specific communities. I can't speak to areas in Queens.
In terms of the broad brush.
Right, well, there may be areas in Queens that have a ton of old apartments that are for, 3 bedrooms and they're for large families, but you have a ton of young single people that are moving in there, and they might need the lower income bands, they might need the smaller apartments. There's absolutely no mapping to what will balance a community. And we've been very vocal about having that income band that's middle and moderate. And we've been asking for that. And I think that this particular UAP and this VI8, well, the UAP program on top of the VIH is not addressing that for us. We have no way through this new program to ensure that we can build a higher AMI.
So in the current zoning, in Hudson Yards and parts of Special Clinton and West Chelsea, you can get an inclusionary bonus, not only for low income, but for moderate income and middle income. This text eliminates that option, and they actually put in their proposal, which I didn't notice at first, eliminate the bespoke AMIs. And I said, like it's a suit, like, give me a break.
That's not fancy.
And so I want to give numbers so people understand. So for a family of 3, 60% AMI is 83,000, right? So imagine you have 2 civil servants that could be making that each, right? And therefore, to get to that AMI, we're talking about an AMI of like 120 or 130. Which is, like 186, like 170 or 186, something like that. So we are excluding people, those people who are making 170,000 in a 2-income household cannot afford $8,000 a month for a 2-bedroom.
Or $6,000.
Or $6,000, whatever, right?
Joe, could you clarify something for me? I mean, I'm looking at the example that's given, a household, 2 civil servants, a
Right.
sanitation worker, project manager, and 1 child. That counts as, am I counting as 5 people? And yet it says 174, 750.
No, it's not 5 people. That's 2 civil servants, meaning 1 civil servant is sanitation worker or a project manager at DHS.
So it's or, it's not and, it was.
Well, no, we'll clarify. In other words, it's two working adults and a child, right? And we want to make sure that those two working adults and a child, or two children, or a child and an aunt or uncle who are living with you,
Right.
have that ability. And I know for a fact, like even a night shift, people make more money than $2.
Right, it just seemed.
Yeah, we'll fix it.
So following Katie's logic on flipping it, can we actually state upfront? We continue to advocate for a broad band of AMIs, and we particularly need middle and moderate income AMIs as we've advocated for the last decade or so.
I would specifically mention civil servants and, yeah.
And start with that, saying that
Do the positive side and say, that is a sector of our city we must also address, not only the lowest, the low.
sorry, Julie, you have.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, I'm not following this, and I do apologize, but you start out universal affordability preference, that paragraph. It says 20% increase, which would increase height of all the seven.
Yes.
How do we say, I don't understand, and then it goes into all this, so
Because
how does that?
we're going to do a couple things here. The problem is, JD, this covers this UAP covers so many areas. We're gonna break it down into some subsections, like we'll have a subsection just about the AMIs and the incomes. So it's clear we're talking about that.
Are you saying that the 20% increase? 20% increase in height of bulb is a problem,
Yes,
but we don't say that, so we're still asking for more information?
we are, yeah, and so let's get, so anything else? So it does say, here are the questions we ask, right? You know, we have significant concentration. What do we do? How do we, look at this section. Build it out more, let's give me more questions, and we'll come back to it.
Oh,
Again,
okay, so we're,
now let's go to the last piece, we're in the home stretch here, now they go down to special zoning districts. And I want to go to the chart and the map
When do you want all these comments by?
during next week.
Next week?
Yeah.
Okay, we all have homework.
So, Clinton special zoning districts, right? We talked specifically, instead of saying, make all the changes in every special zoning district, let's work together to locate areas where we could build more affordable housing than just a wholesale change. And I think what we do there is we go to our affordable housing plan and start to indicate, here are the areas, if you proceed, you could do more housing. Now, yes.
Can you start this section by actually speaking to how much affordable housing we produced in the special Clinton district? Can you start with that?
Maybe I want to do it
And-
before all the districts, because that affects all.
Okay, yeah, so maybe it's special zoning districts, how much have we produced?
Produced
And
today.
then talking about how much we predict in our zoning plan that we can achieve while maintaining the special district. That's
could I add to that? I don't know if this is useful or not, but so much of our housing stock was built before 1900. A lot of the proposals are probably not possible or feasible. So we want to recommend feasible areas that could increase.
No, so JD, money can make everything feasible. It's gonna get pipes for him, and it's gonna drive steel up to a building to build a 4-story addition, trust me. It's all about money.
So JD's building will get 2 more stories and he'll get an elevator?
No, we got 4 more stories.
It won't be the top floor anymore.
No, and the elevator will displace 4 people because they're going to apartments. I mean, this is the kind of like, by the way, we're joking, but this is the kind of stuff that actually will be driven by
So
this.
again, you mentioned that, and I think that's very key, JD, about the housing stock that exists. The fact that many of them are walk-ups,
Mhm.
and that the increased height may not be feasible because
That's
of the
right, but what is
infrastructure.
feasible is over here.
And I think, Joe, even though you made a joke,
Mhm.
we need to write that in there somewhere. To create the possibility of adding the height to some of these buildings, they will require an elevator in walk-ups, which will actually displace what is our existing.
Right, you cannot build a 6-story walk-up anymore.
Existing
By law.
affordable stock, and that's the one thing that I think that, I don't know if in the preamble, and I apologize for not having read that part. if we, highlight that one of our objectives has been to protect existing affordable stock at the same time having produced as much.
It's disrupting this place.
Okay,
Existing.
I've seen that built on Ninth Avenue around 54th, 52nd, 53rd, where they actually added a couple of floors.
Yes,
One floor.
yeah.
Yeah,
Between-
that's, of course, they didn't put an elevator in.
They would have to now.
I just don't see that being as feasible, and some of these, what, small landlords that.
Yeah, I have to say again, you gotta get past the small landlords are not feasible. This zoning will increase the value dramatically of properties. And those properties will move from a small landlord to an investor.
To the best, I understand that.
And do not for a moment think development knows it's water through rock, it's gonna figure it out.
Which means that they're gonna displace these people who are living there, and they're gonna have to move and relocate them. And we're
Or
gonna.
private
They're gonna buy them out.
And then it's gonna increase the housing costs as well, and we're gonna be right back where we started.
So given all that, we know, let's come to now. Nellie, if you can page down to the chart. Because this is something that we did not see, because the presentation was very quick, and remember, we had the whole presentation, and then the last 20 minutes, we heard this, right? Please look at this. We now see for the first time, existing height. 50 to 66 feet. The proposed height, 75 feet. That's for the base, JD, for the first time base, right? But if you have an affordable units, your 66-foot building can go to 85 feet, right? The base, what we didn't see clearly, look at the maximum heights, right? The avenue is 85 feet, which is roughly 9 stories. That would now be 12 stories on the avenue. In the mid-block, today, it is 66 feet maximum, right? 66 feet, which they now say is the base height. That would be increased to 75 feet, but if you do affordable housing, that 66 feet goes from 7 stories to 10.
Wow.
So try to imagine for a moment, all of these tenement and brownstone blocks in Clinton Special Zoning District. And page down 1 second, Nellie, for the map. So the red, no, yeah, show the whole map. That is all the blocks between 8th and 9th and 10th and over toward 11th that you cannot go higher than 66 feet.
Now,
So,
today.
Those blocks could go to 10 stories, right? So most buildings are 60 feet at a 5-story tenement, or maybe 50 feet at a 4-story tenement. So we're talking in a 4-story tenement, you could now build a 10-story building. If anyone in this room doesn't think that's gonna create a real estate incentive, that's a problem.
I'm not sure that math is right, though, because you can do, if it's a 4-story building currently,
Mhm.
they're limited by, they can upsize by 20%.
No,
But they.
no, they have a hard height limit, 66 feet.
So they can go up to that first, and then
No, period, today.
today, no, but
I'm saying if today it's 4 stories.
Yes, roughly 50 feet.
Right? Then the 20% applies to the 4 stories, it doesn't apply to what they,
There is no 20% today.
no, but if,
with the new plan.
with the new plan isn't saying we're adding 20, that people can build up to 20% of what could have been built there to maximum. It's saying we're adding 20% to what is there.
We already are,
No.
that's right.
No, that's incorrect. It's not, there's FAR and there's height. The height is independent of the FAR. If today you had a 4-story shallow building, right? You could make that building deeper, no problem, but you're still capped at 66 feet.
Right?
This says, no, go back to the chart, no, sorry. The chart, page back.
So you're saying the 20% applies to, not to the height of the building,
No.
but to the FAR?
FAR only, yeah. So we have in all of our zoning districts on the west side here, height limits. In some cases, base height limits and overall height limits. In Clinton Special Preservation Area, there is no base height at all. It is 66 feet, period, in the mid blocks, which is approximately 7 stories. So that means immediately we go to 75 feet, right, which is roughly 8 stories. Because remember, the floor to floor heights the new floor to floor heights are always lower than the current ones, right?
Okay.
Older buildings have higher floor to floor. And then with the affordable housing, you go to 105 feet, roughly 11 stories. So that is a huge, huge change. And again, I bring us to the block with the 4-story tenement, the 5-story tenement. That 4-story tenement is the target because it's so much more valuable with this change. Now, here's the thing we talk about in general, how we manage through this, right? The reason that this district exists is because when it was put together, there was a compromise made that the perimeter, meaning go to the map again. Sorry, Nelly?
I'm sorry, repeat that again?
Back to the map.
Okay.
Just page down. I see something. So the compromise that was struck here, the whole map, please. Just pull it down a little bit so we can see the whole map.
It's the online thing.
It's the online thing.
Mhm.
So there we go, perfect. So the compromise that was struck is that the perimeter of the district, 8th Avenue and West 42nd Street, would be upzoned in density with no height limits in order to have a much larger and dense area. And the center of the neighborhood would be preserved, the preservation area. So we've been through this discussion already, and this district is literally 51 years old. And it's withstood the test of time because what's happened is the perimeter has continued to produce affordable housing because of the inclusionary housing bonus. And we've seen that, and there are other areas that are further west that also have an inclusionary housing bonus. And in those areas, it's a slightly lower density, but it requires inclusionary housing. So there's like the accommodation, you preserve the center in order to not disturb the existing long-term rent stabilized tenants. And you allow development to happen on the 8th Avenue corridor, 42nd Street, and then portions west, also not on this map before.
So Joe, I think it's important that you actually lead with that we've created the zoning in order to protect existing affordable housing and allow for more density in areas that can handle it. So we've done this already. I think it's important to highlight that first, and then perhaps warn of repeating, our history repeating. To say we've seen this before, and that was in the 80s, and that's why we ended up having to put in.
It was in the 70s.
70s and 80s.
What we saw was demolition.
Right.
Because there was a desire to do major construction here. So, and if anything, our community board should note has extended the areas with inclusionary housing inside this district further to the west on 11th Avenue, mid blocks on 24,
too, it's 100 feet in.
150.
150, all the way down to 8th Avenue.
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, like to remind them, like, we got here for a reason. And if anything, I think we should conclude this section by saying, and our affordable housing plan states, please rezone the west side of 11th Avenue to produce more affordable housing. We have many sites. Yeah, with the height limits, sure. We have many sites here that we can quantify to say, if you take these actions, you will produce X. I like to go back to Roberta's quick off the cuff thing she did. I didn't realize she did that totally. The acres, the number of units per acre, did you catch that at our meeting?
Yeah, we don't have acres.
No. Oh, no, but Roberta went online and found out how many acres the community board for. And used the city's methodology to say how many units, and it was 1,000 units. I think our affordable housing plan was like 15,000 units or something. So,
Joe,
yes.
this is absolutely terrific. Now, but this is just the Clinton special.
Yeah, there's more.
So.
Yeah, so I want to note one more thing though too. I've asked the community board office to purchase a program called SketchUp in order for us to do modeling to show on any given block, if you had these changes, what the consequence would be. Similar to what we saw when we saw the city of Yes, carbon neutrality, they said do this and do that. And they show us something here like, but I think from a bird's eye view, the bird's eye view doesn't tell the story. It's when you're on the street. It's what it
Joe,
looks like.
I second the use of that technology because as someone who struggles to like see the bigger picture when we just talk about it, this map was just very helpful. So I want to be able to see the bird's eye view of how this destroys the composition of our neighborhood if they execute the city of Yes in its current proposed fashion.
So, I want to go to one member of the public, because we talked, she's been waiting for a while. Fears, you have a question or a thought?
Nellie, does she need to be brought over?
Yeah.
Yes, hold on one second.
It's just been helpful going through this, the government so far, like trying to spoon it on, but I think part of it is they gave us like text. A chart is much easier to consume, and the maps of the chart are much easier to consume.
Hi, Elka.
Hi. Hi there. You guys are doing some great work, so thank you very much. I mean, the picture is not pretty. I would like to see the city of No, but just to remind you, in the 70s, I mean, I've only been here, 41 years? Building owners would set apartments and buildings on fire so they could get rid of tenants in order to rehab and get higher rents, etc. I mean, and I can only see that this might happen again. SROs, although there were some really good ones in the 40s, most of them turned into drug dens and brothels. I remember Midtown Enforcement trying to close them down. I think the last one was maybe 45th Street and 8th Avenue or so. So, you know, and Community Board 4 has done so much in terms of affordable apartments, all ranges, which is the only way that I think anybody can survive or make it viable. That until the other boroughs show a little bit, you know, that they do their share, we do have fair share. And I mean, we need to point that out a lot. And it'd be nice just to sit around and say we're not doing anything until the others do something, you know, at least up to what CB4 has done. So I know it's not possible, it's pie in the sky, but again, this is, I mean, it's very sad and frustrating.
Elka, just for the record, if you can just say your affiliation.
West 47th, 48th Street Block Association.
Thank
Also
you.
a homeowner.
And former MC.
Former co-chair of this committee.
Yeah, former co-chair of this committee.
Yeah, I'm glad.
You remember, yeah. But also, you know, I also am a homeowner and I have a brownstone. So, you know, when I think of the mid blocks, the side blocks in the 40s and all, I mean, their whole identity, you know, the aesthetics, everything will change if people take advantage of the additional bulk and all. And that's kind of a scary proposition.
I'm 100% behind you. And I've seen this firsthand. As you know, I live in an SRO. And this whole thing that's before us right now, it's going to give them an incentive to do exactly what you just said. They're going to take advantage now. They're not going to take care of any of the properties. I recently, I was just in court on the case, but we just put a couple tiles on the floor and that was it. Doesn't care. I think they know that this is eventually going to go through. So they just don't want to invest money.
Don't say that anyone knows anything's gonna go through, because we're in the middle of a public process, and our job is to offer serious alternatives and ways to balance things back and forth.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna push for it. They're gonna push for it. The owners are gonna push for that. That's their way of not.
I'm gonna go to JD and then a roll.
This is correct.
Yeah.
But we need Chelsea in here as well.
Chelsea is right here. It's on page, starting on page 10.
Oh, sorry.
And just, I'll give you some quick notes. And put it back on the screen for a moment, Nellie. There are things that in Chelsea, people will not be happy about. So This West Chelsea special zoning, can you put up on the,
Keep going.
okay, sorry.
Give me just 1 second. My screen is frozen.
I'll let you how this works.
Maybe Nellie's screen is giving an indication. that-
Yes, we're coming to the very end here, right now, like 5 to 7 minutes in this. Well, why don't you speak in the meantime while Nellie's working on the screen?
Thank you. Going back to that chart where it showed existing height, proposed height, and proposed height with UAP, I'm having a little bit of trouble with the math. If I understand correctly, this is supposed to go from whatever the existing height is today plus 20%.
No. And again, I gotta have your ears open. Katie asked that question. It's not about 20% of height, it's 20% of bulk. The height is independent from the bulk.
Well, then,
It has
what
nothing,
is the increase?
it has nothing, the height has nothing to do with the increase, they just made up numbers.
Okay.
Now it makes sense.
So we're going to the next
So,
chart.
I just want to go, yeah, so go down, Ellie, please, just to the West Chelsea map, which is one more page, keep going. Right, so, okay, so now, so here's the problem, he just gave us the West Chelsea district. Doesn't really help us, because the West Chelsea district, you can see the shape of it, now go page up again, and we'll get you the right thing next time, go up, send it out. The whole thing. There, now, this district, this is, special district has sub areas A through I. Every single sub area has different heights and base heights and this and that. The highlights here are sub area F, has a height today of 80 feet, 8 stories. Under their proposal, it's 12 stories. So they have arbitrarily changed things. Every single height limit here was negotiated, and the underlying FARs were negotiated in order to make the High Line work. This was about transferring High Line development rights, right? Everything is changed as if those zoning negotiations, which are embodied, by the way, in the West Chelsea points of agreement that detail this one by one, don't exist. And the basic issue here was, go to the map again, Nellie, sorry. Is similar to Clinton Special. On the northern part, 29th, 28th, and 30th became high-rise districts where inclusionary housing was required. Along 11th Avenue in the West 20s, medium-rise inclusionary housing required. And that was in exchange for keeping the central portion lower. The same operative idea. So what we'll also put together in these charts is not only this version of the letter did not have the FAR changes. We'll put that in there too. And then specifically all the sub-districts to see how it works. And I just want to note, we don't need to look at it, the Hudson Yards, the same thing, a bunch of sub-districts bulk put on certain areas to create incredible density. And then the mid-block core preserved. And yes, we knew we were not getting affordable housing in the mid-blocks because we were getting heavy density and affordable housing along 10th Avenue, 11th Avenue, and along West 34th Street. And we have the numbers on the production. So I think one of the things here underlying all this is with these special zoning districts, we made a deal back and forth to accept a lot of density throughout our whole neighborhood. And we crafted where the density would land in order to preserve the existing housing stock. And our measure of success is Community District 4 has produced the highest number of housing units, both market rate and affordable, 3 years in a row in the city, in accordance with city planning's reports. So we're going to embody a lot of that to say, this was the rationale, this was the idea. And in fact, there are certain areas of Hudson Yards that we want to change further. Like the 11th Avenue corridor in the West 30s, from West 34th up to West 39th, says maximum, the FARs are huge. They're 14, 15, 22, 31, right? Crazy. But the residential FAR is limited at 6. Because the idea was to create more commercial space. We now know.
I'm just thinking though, like, but playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
The city is gonna say, yeah, we get that you were protecting all the wealthy brownstone owners in the middle and you were pushing.
They're
all-
not wealthy brownstone owners.
Hold on, but some are, but
The minority are.
But I can totally see them saying, no, good job, we applaud you, we've always said you guys are great. But the good news is now with our plan of getting rid of all of this bespoke, we're just gonna have, you've done a great job and now we're just adding to it. Now we're just saying 20% everywhere. And how do you, and yes, we can show them, but there were real reasons why we did it this way and that way, and we got all this extra housing, and I think their response is simply gonna be like, yeah, you did a great job before, and now we're just treating everybody the same, and there can't be anything wrong with that.
My answer is 2024 is not called year one. Right?
It's not what?
It's not year one. It's not the beginning of time, right?
Right.
That the reason the city exists and the reason we as a city don't
Yeah.
embrace Robert Moses' vision of the city,
Yeah.
which is one size fits all, knock down various sections,
Yeah.
rebuild, screw everybody, screw communities, is that the zoning that the city of New York developed from the 1970s through the present recognize that the city is a conglomeration of neighborhoods with different needs. And in fact, our community board has excelled in making sure we both preserve and incentivize growth and balance growth. We do it all the time. And to say that that today everyone's being treated the same, I'm sorry. We were not being treated the same. We sat at the table with every single version of city planning for the past 40 years and said, give us your difficult stuff, give us the million, and by the way, it's a matter of scale. We're talking Hudson Yards produced 20 million square feet of new development. That is not a small amount to talk about.
Yeah.
And so when I'm gonna say that Bayside, is gonna produce, like 400,000 square feet, give me a break. I mean, we have done this, and we're gonna continue to do it. I think this is, and by the way, in the end, it's a political issue.
So Kay, I think the response that we could give to them is to show them the actual affordable housing plan. Because we've actually mapped out how to get
Better.
those
Yeah.
additional units.
And I think that's the answer, saying, oh, well, we put a lot of work into this. What? I think what we have to say is,
We have.
you know what, you want whatever, 20% more, which comes out to whatever.
1,000 units.
1,000 units, you want 1,000 units, good news, we already have plans.
Well, magic for 5,000.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, but you know what, but like, guess what, give us some recognition and some credit. For, we have a whole plan in place for actually doing this well, as opposed to just doing
And
it.
it's practicing.
So just piggybacking on that, maybe a way to actually approach this is to align on the objective.
Exactly.
The CDBG's objective is to produce more affordable housing.
We'd be
Full
delighted.
stop, full stop.
We
And
share.
again, not even talking about fair share, not even talking whatever it is,
We
just
should-
saying,
We share the goal, and we support the goal.
this has always
Before
been a
you
goal.
go.
This has always been a goal of this district.
Right.
And
And we're happy to commit to it.
And we are already committed to it, and if the objective through what they're proposing is to get to, and maybe we can quantify the actual number, say a number of whatever units. Our plan within our existing zoning, we can produce that, we can just give them 11th Avenue.
11th Avenue.
Right there, is exactly, and again, what that also does, and then we can add the argument, this preserves community context, but also does not provide any incentives for displacement of our existing affordable stock. Because we cannot blanketly build our way to affordable housing. We need to recognize we do have people who have affordable housing.
Yeah.
And we need to put in more safeguards to protect what is.
If we are building and we're losing, we're not getting to a net gain.
So anyway, I like the flipping, but
Yeah,
then
that's
I
good.
think starting with, we have a shared objective, but our plan works for this community and actually gets to the number you want. And our
Exceeds the number.
exceeds it, and the reasons why we don't support these wholesale changes are boom, 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 after we've already stated we can get to their number.
So I think.
Do we have to vote?
No.
Says vote.
This is a very good, like back and forth batting around. Let's sum up by just going around, just talking about what we accomplished today and how we are, and 5 minutes. Dolores.
I spoke enough.
Okay, roll.
No, I think it's great, the going through the text, getting to understand some of the issues. I'm glad about the clarification about the impact of SRO. Also about the campus infill and what the issues, the impact of players and parking lots. No, I think it's excellent. I especially like the flipping idea. And the idea of that we share the goals of the city to produce the affordable housing, but perhaps we have a better plan.
I'm gonna say better, I'm gonna say
A different
a
plan.
more nuanced plan that can create more production.
Or to avoid any of that.
Unintended consequences.
We go to the online folks.
Oh, I'm sorry, online, Betty? Oh,
Betty's already gone.
Betty's gone. Travis?
I second everything that was just stated. I think we need a more thought out, more nuanced plan. I support flipping things. And basically Dolores captured all of my concerns with this plan from the absolute beginning. So I second everything that Dolores had to say.
Paul, and then we'll go to JD. You're on that mute there, Paul.
Still.
While Paul's unmuting.
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to associate myself with those remarks. All of them. This is a one size fits all. You're right. We don't want Robert Moses to rise from the dead. There are too many holes in this plan. It's like, and the guys who presented it, this is just my take on it. It's like nobody ever did anything before they got here. It was sort of sad, I thought. Anyway, the big sprawling plan. I don't want my special district messed with. That's about it. It's a big complicated, but it is so improvable. It's not funny. Thank you for all the work everyone has already done. That's it.
JD?
Yeah, this is terrific, but I think Katie's answer was not met, which is, why don't we just say, great, thank you, we're still gonna have the 20%. So this is all terrific. I'm all for it, but I would like some strong paragraph statement in there that this is destructive to a social fabric, to a neighborhood.
An identity.
An identity, which is terribly important for the functioning of any city. That is also important. You remember, city planning said to us, we don't care about that. I asked the question, I said, what about the social consequences? Displacement, whatever, we don't care. We're focused on affordable housing. We need to also emphasize the importance of people in the community.
Hey.
It's pretty well crafted. As I said earlier, though, I think I'm pretty concerned about that these developers be required to do the environmental impact studies and everything, but comply with them before anything's even built. Like a bigger school, bigger medical centers, whatever it takes, but I don't think we should be allowed to proceed.
Whatever it is, if we tie it to that C of O issue, that means they have to do these things as part of it.
Great.
But, okay, I'm sorry.
Kate?
So I think, JD, to your point, I think we have to say, awesome, that you want to add 20%. We think it's a great, I think every district should be adding 20%. We're happily committed to adding more than 20%. We have a really finely crafted plan that is going to protect our district while at the same time adding more than 20%. Let us do it our way. If you do it your way, if you insist that we do it your way, it's gonna have all these unintended consequences, so we have to really be clear that we absolutely support the goal and we're well on our way because we are such smart people, we're already on our way. And if we do it their way, it's gonna actually screw things up, right?
I do not support their plan. I do not think it's feasible or it's gonna produce lower rents or more affordable. But I understand your point. But I don't want to lose sight of the destruction of all we've built in the last 50 years.
If they insist on us doing it their way.
Exactly.
Before Pete, from the public, Rosemary?
Nellie, would you be able to bring Rosemary over? Hi, Rosemary.
Rosemary Garces. No.
Should be a typo.
Chris's mother.
It's Chrissy.
I know.
You're on mute.
You're on mute and we're gonna go to, oh, there we go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, yes.
Hi.
I just want to say, you're working so hard. You're definitely super smart people. I liked everything, that Dolores said, what Travis has said. I like especially the very end piece about, yes, we have the same goal. We support you on your goal, but look at how we achieved it. Because otherwise, for me, I've only read let's say the tip of the iceberg on this. And for me, it stings to high heaven. My immediate reaction was, oh, we're bringing back a more modernized SROs. Oh, are we going to legitimize illegal, basement apartments, et cetera, et cetera. So this required more conversation, and I appreciate it. I would vote no. I feel that we're at a point right now that we're in a city where anything and everything goes. So that title, the city of yes, yeah, it applies to letting anything and everything go. We can't just take one brush and paint the whole city the same.
Thank you, Rosemary. Pete.
The method that we've been using for, 15, 20 years, I think it's the best method that's worked for us. What the city or the mayor is proposing is one thing, but I think we should stick to our plan. And I think the density, it's going to present a problem. We have we have produced the most affordable housing throughout the city, United States, to just about everybody that I come across. We do it in a responsible way, and that's the very, very good thing about it. Much of the city doesn't have this experience, and I think because they don't have this experience, they probably will have to look to Community Board 4 for that. But I think we're the guidelines for that. I'm more affordable housing, and I believe that Community Board 4 does it in a responsible way. So
Thank you, Pete. You have the last word, Rachel.
Oh, my.
Sum us all up and take us home.
I already sent comments in the first half. I think the second half, I'll take another look and send anything else, but I think we hashed it out enough. One qualitative kind of big picture thought I had was looking back at the day we got the presentation from the city of yes team. I think Roberta had commented on it also. We mentioned the point about how Health Kitchen, we have a lot of young folks, right? You mentioned earlier briefly, I think, about young professionals and postgraduates. I wonder if we can include somewhere in the letter, I was looking for maybe in the background, now that we're making the point also about how we have contributed to affordable housing and making all these contextual edits. Maybe the fact that we have a lot of young professionals now who are living in Hell's Kitchen, struggling to pay rent. A lot of people are moving back with their parents, right? We're living in that time. I wonder if we can speak to that aspect of our demographic in addition to all the great things that we've shared about the special.
We definitely should, because the point of it is that it's balancing the demographic needs.
Right.
Like that dwelling unit.
The only caveat to that, I think it's important for us to actually get those demographics.
We can get them.
I think
We get it
that since you have already.
It's plenty before, we have that every
Since you
year.
already have placeholders for income staff and all of that, if, you have capacity to look into that, I would really appreciate it.
Rachel, that is so easy. It's literally a report published every year by DCP.
Yeah.
We can pull it, we can get
I'm
it.
happy to Google it too, but
But if you could. With map and back and forth, because getting that information pulled quickly is great.
Okay, thank you.
The bonus at point, Rachel, I don't understand.
Recognizing that Hell's Kitchen, not just change, but I think also recognizing that a huge part of our demographics is also postgraduate, post-college grad, young professionals, also struggling to afford housing or keep their rents, right? So trying to address the point there, in addition to all the kind of historic aspect of what we're talking about, we are.
So that's what I'm questioning, do we already know that a huge portion of our demographic is that
We
demographic.
know that our household size has dropped in the last 5 years. That we know demographically, and the population trend will show, we know that.
Yeah, I just want to be careful of,
No, we're not gonna-
So we will look for stats to.
We're not gonna start anything that we can't.
Yeah, but, you know, I'm sure, I mean, you said it shouldn't be hard to find it.
No, it's interesting to watch, there's some specific changes. Household size has gone down, some of the incomes have gone up, but then there's also people in poverty have gone up too, because like aging is a whole
you have
different.
to think about cause and effects.
Right.
How size of household could also be going down because our teachers, our firefighters, et cetera, are moving out into the outer boroughs or out of the city with their families because they can't afford to live here. So again, I think it's very important to understand what those stats are telling us and not come to a conclusion.
I think what it is, Dolores, is been driving it. Our housing production has been mostly studios and 1 bedrooms. And therefore,
New housing.
or new housing production, therefore, the population that's increased, it's oriented toward that single person demographic. And a lot of those, I've watched that, that's in yard stuff, it's gone up, like, there's a direct correlation, I think. But let's find it. Is there a motion to adjourn this evening?
Motion to adjourn.
And Kim will come back to it, and we'll really have a much more, you might get 2 or 3 versions of this letter prior to our July
Did
meeting.
anybody second it?
Second.
We're voting with our feet.
Thanks, Paul, thanks, Travis,
Thanks,
thanks,
guys.
Alex, thanks to the rest of the public that stuck around.
Thank you all.
Night.
Good night all.